Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lambcast. This is episode 750, and I'm your host, Richard Kirkham from Kirkham A Movie A Day. This week, we have some incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed-up movie bloggers. In honor of Halloween, we're putting together a horror film draft show for you, but only certain films are eligible. I can assure you that the night of the day of the dawn of the sun of the bride of the return of the revenge of the terror of the attack of the evil mutant alien flesh-eating hellbound zombified living dead will not be on the list. It was released in 1991. This draft is limited to films that came out in 1972 or earlier. There are a few reasons that we limited the entries to this time period. First,
oh my God.
Howard suddenly realizes that there's a time limit.
Yeah, these instructions in his email, really cryptic.
I got anything else right, but
it's okay.
I'm going to have to do some thinking.
Well, the first reason was that was the suggestion from a listener that prompted the episode to begin with. A second reason is that I'm looking for films that don't always get covered during this season. Let's try and broaden our tastes a little. Another reason is that 1973 marked a transition in horror films, with The Exorcist breaking out of the horror ghetto and becoming a mainstream success. And finally, this limitation means that I don't have to engage in one more conversation or argument over whether or not Jaws is a horror film. So this episode, I will possess your corpse, and the fearless podcast killers will make their choices. So get out your cauldron of blood and get ready for a flesh feast. I don't have 2,000 maniacs on the show, but we do have 5 lambs ready to silence their critics with some amazing choices. Let me introduce you to our blood-sucking freaks on the draft. He walked with a zombie to get here, David Brook of Blueprint Review. Welcome, David.
They're here already. You're next. You're next. You're next.
Todd Liebenow is a beast with 10 fingers, and he knows how to use them on the computer keyboard at Forgotten Films.
Boo.
The Thing from Another Podcast, Howard Casner, joins us from Pop Art.
I'm alive. I'm alive.
The Screaming Skull of Aaron Neuwirth joins us from Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
They're coming to get you, Richard.
And with opinions that wouldn't die, Dave Anderson and his box of free kittens also joins the show.
I'm not alive yet. I haven't had enough coffee.
We make no guarantees about being spoiler-free on this week's episode, so proceed at your own risk. And believe me, nobody comes back after dark. All right. Before the show, we did a selection wheel and the order in which people are going to be picking. David Brook will be our first picker. Howard is second. Todd will be right in the middle along with Aaron. Dave Anderson follows up. And I ended up at the tail end again. And we do a snake draft. So remember, at the end, we rotate back and they'll be here. David, you're on the clock. It's up to you. David Brooks, what's your first choice?
Okay. I was torn. There's a film that I keep thinking of putting in there, but I wouldn't normally think of it as horror, so I'm going to skip it. Somebody might get to it later, but instead, obviously, I'm going first. I'm going to go for a biggie, and I am going to go for Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, sorry, guys. It had to be in there. Really, it's not the first zombie film, but it's the first it kind of set the template for zombie films to come. Even zombie films these days are still kind of referencing it and doing similar things. And it's a film when I watched as a kid that absolutely terrified me. A lot of people prefer Dawn of the Dead, but the first one for me, it just the bit with the little girl killing her parents, it just messed me up. It disturbed me so much, that scene. And it's brilliantly made for next to nothing by George Romero. There's social commentary in there. It's just superb. It's an obvious choice, but I'm first to pick, so it's going to be an obvious choice.
Well, that's an unhappy ending for most of us on the show, and it's another one of those movies that has an unhappy ending too. So.
Oh yeah.
It was a downer when I remember seeing it. I went, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And of course, it's happened numerous times since then that you get the bad outcome. Good things don't always happen at the end of the horror movie, which maybe makes dread a little bit more common in films nowadays.
That poor house. I mean, the mortgage is going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, good luck getting insurance. If you're in California, that house would never get insured.
The version they have of this on Criterion is just gorgeous. If you haven't watched it, I mean, for a movie that was notoriously in the public domain, and every upstart video cassette label released a cruddy copy of it, the Criterion copy is so gorgeous.
Yes.
All right, the sales force is out for Criterion this week, but we're going to make them wait a little bit more for their next recommendation. Howard, it's your turn. Now remember, 1972 or earlier.
Well, strangely enough, I had like 3 or 4 that were before 1972 as it was, so this isn't too bad. But I will start with psychological horror, and I would choose Psycho. The 1960
by the way,
film produced.
I expect this to continue for the next 3 rounds.
I know. I was kind of like.
All right, Howard.
Yeah, we all know Psycho. It's the 1960 film by Alfred Hitchcock about the nice guy next door who tends to murder people who stop by his hotel. Based on a true story or inspired by a true story. It is one of the great films, actually, of all times, and was quite important in Hitchcock's career. It was actually the second film that showed a toilet. Most people think it was the first film, but actually the first film that showed a toilet was No Time for Sergeants, which was released before Psycho. But I'm not sure what to say about Psycho that hasn't been said. We covered it on Pop Art, combining it with Peeping Tom. So I think Psycho in many ways speaks for itself.
Well, clearly, you used the toilet thing as like one of the top 3 things to talk about for Psycho.
We're stretching, looking for something unique here. Norman Bates was not permanent latrine orderly, I guess, so he just had to wait his turn to use the toilet.
Yep.
Something about Psycho I only just realized a few weeks ago. There's the trailer with Hitchcock walking around the set, and basically, this is where it happened and all that. It's one of the greatest trailers of all time. But the final moment of that, he rips open the shower curtain, and a woman is there screaming, and very quickly the title Psycho appears. So you can't really see the woman totally, but I always assumed it was Janet Leigh. It's Vera Miles. And I was like, oh, wow,
She's doing her screaming early in the movie, in the trailer. Well, do you guys have a favorite scene from Psycho just before we move on?
Yeah.
Aaron, what's your favorite scene?
Most things with Marty Balsam in that movie, but there's among the things that, the whole movie's perfect, but there's the scene where Marty Balsam and Norman Bates are they're talking about Arbogast, and Norman Bates are talking about the ledger, and there's a shot that's under Norman Bates' head, and the film has a lot of bird imagery surrounding him, and so there's this shot under his head, and he cranes his neck all the way over at one point to while he's chewing on some stuff, and to try to go on this story that Arbogast is putting together about what he thinks happened, and he just has this just such an awkward look and such an awkward camera angle that always sticks out to me. That's my favorite scene in Psycho.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else have one?
And of course,
the car, the car going under the water.
The car.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that.
A scene that sticks out for me, especially as a homeowner now, is the scene where Marion is first stepping in the shower, and she gets in the shower and then turns on the water. And I don't know about you, but when I turn on the shower, that shit is ice cold. And That's pretty brave if you ask me.
That's why the base hotel's so great. The Yelp reviews are wonderful. The showers are always hot. That's what they say on the ads.
Well, if it wasn't, we would understand why that woman was screaming when Hitchcock swung back the shower curtain, because the water was cold. Yeah, I love the scene with Marion and Norman in the back room while they're having something to eat, and that whole interaction between the two of them is just perfect. Like you said, I think everything in this movie is pretty damn good. Well, Todd, you're not going to have to be disappointed anymore. You get to choose next.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out which I want to take, because I could go a couple different ways. I'm trying to think what might come back round to me. I think I'm going to go with something that's maybe a little more obscure, but I just think it's one of the most brilliant horror movies ever made, and more people need to see it. So I'm going to take Island of Lost Souls.
Very nice.
From 1932. I don't know if it's the first, but it's one of the earliest versions of the Dr. Moreau story, and Charles Lawton brilliantly plays Dr. Moreau, one of the creepiest performances ever. Also a great performance from Bela Lugosi as the giver of the law, and of course we can't forget Kathleen Burke, the Panther Woman, who won a national contest to play the role in the film. But it's just such a disturbing movie, and so wonderfully crafted. I mean, it's very much in the tradition of the Universal stuff, but this is Paramount. This is when the other studios were trying to cash in on what Universal was doing, and it's one of the best pre-code films ever made. So, yeah.
I gotta be honest.
Like it is probably the first. Oh no, there was a silent version in 1921, but it was the first sound version.
Yeah, I can't say that I've seen this version. I've seen at least two of the subsequent ones, but this one it remains on my radar for the future. But if it's a first round choice, it must be worthy.
Well, it is considered the best of the three, and it is a really good movie, somewhat sick at its core.
Yeah. It looks.
Are we not men?
It's got a bit of an expressionistic noir kind of look to it as well. It looks gorgeous. It's very good.
Excellent.
Yeah, the German expressionism was really making inroads in Hollywood.
Looking forward to it. Aaron, what do you finally get to pick?
All right, so my initial goal with this draft was to pick one movie from each decade, as much as I would allow. And so we've already gone through some of my major choices here. So I'm going to start right at the top. We're going to go with Nosferatu, 1922. Right now, it's really a secret adaptation of Dracula. That certainly caused no troubles whatsoever for him. It was completely easy to make. I actually, at the time of this recording, just this week, I was able to go to see a screening of Nosferatu that was synced up with Radiohead's Kid A and Amnesiac, which made for a really good, having seen Nosferatu plenty of times, that was a really interesting experience to just see how the movie would go together with it. It was very relaxing for a movie about, creepy Nosferatu, trying to get that real estate deal. But his only goal, I believe. I think that was
absolutely.
A lot of real estate talk on this podcast, by the way, this week. I think that it really matters. And there's some other movies to talk about that I think will have houses in them that are important. But Nosferatu,
location.
Exactly. Much like we're talking about some of the other movies. There's only so much you really have to say about some of these classics, but Nosferatu, I mean, it's the use of shadow work alone is spectacular in that film. But there's so much to appreciate about what a silent film like that can offer, and yes, obviously the expression of the play, the choices it's making to convey horror in that kind of sphere. It's a wonderful film.
And of course, it's been remade a number of times, including one that's coming out Christmas.
Yeah,
I'm very curious about that one.
And it was spectacular. So I like the track record for Nosferatu remakes is pretty good so far. So I'm excited.
Actually, one of the ones who prefers the remake, the Werner Herzog.
The Herzog, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very
very,
good.
very good. Yeah, it's super creepy.
But your selection, of course, has also had a movie made about the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Shadow of the Vampire, which is excellent. And I appreciate the fact that Willem Dafoe is Max Schreck in that film, and he's going to be Van Helsing in the new Nosferatu. So he's double dipping in the Nosferatu pool.
Nice.
Shadow of the Vampire, that was one of my mom's favorite movies. I like it, it's very good, but she loved that movie too. She was so into the idea of the movie making about that movie.
Excellent. Dave Anderson, you're up.
Okay, this was actually a hard list to do because there's been so many great ones. So I narrowed it down to 5 titles that I specifically remember really scaring me when I was a child, even if it was only for a single scene. And so these are my childhood trauma movies. And I'm going to start with the earliest first, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray from 1945. Okay. Oscar Wilde's novel has been adapted a lot of times over the years, but to me, this is the best version. And I accidentally saw this one for the first time when my sister was watching it while I was in the same room doing something else. And I didn't share her love of old movies at the time, especially black and white ones. So I wasn't paying a lot of attention because a lot of the first act seemed more like a romantic period drama, at least until that god-awful, hideous painting appeared on screen for the first time. And, the entire movie's in black and white except for the shots of that painting. The plot is Dorian Gray. He's this impossibly handsome aristocrat who poses for a painting. And also present at the unveiling is this guy named Henry Wotton, played by George Sanders, and he's a cynical cad who kind of encourages Gray to indulge in hedonistic behavior. And Dorian Gray is pretty gullible and starts behaving worse. And he retains his youth throughout the years, but the painting the painting itself reflects what a monster he's becoming. And over the years, everyone else in the community finds his youth unnerving. And with every sin he commits, the painting gets worse. And to keep his secret, Gray hides this portrait, in a locked room. And the painting, it looks like something from a Cannibal Corpse album cover. And when it's presented in full color at key moments, it really heightens the shock value, and it just scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. And his face is kind of unnerving before the image begins to change, and I found that really scary. And that image just gave me nightmares. And I watched it again not too long ago, and even now when that painting flashes across the screen, I still
get the heebie-jeebies,
jump a little bit. Yes, even to this day. So I really love this film.
The painting, which is by Ivan Institute.
Another reason to visit
Chicago.
Chicago.
At an auction. It sold at an auction for a lot of money at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those films that I've ran across years ago late at night. I think it might have been TCM, but it could have been some other channel that I was scrolling by, and I watched it. It had to be before TCM, because I know I'd saw it when I was younger. So, and it was unnerving. It was very creepy, and the idea that your sins and your evilness will be reflected in the painting and not on your face. Your life is appearing someplace else. It's the idea. That's I think an interesting concept, and one that explains why he could be soulless and act the way he does to everybody later on.
I used to deal with the devil. He'll never grow old, but
there you go.
His sins have to be there somewhere. The big problem with the film, though I love it, don't get me wrong, is Herb Hatfield, who is absolutely a beautiful young man as Dorian Gray, is rather a bland actor and never really made it. The movie is stolen by both George Sanders and Angela Lansbury, who gives a heartbreaking performance.
Yes, she was great in that. All right, well, we've got to the end of the first round, and I still have one film on my list that I wanted to pick in the first round, so it's okay. I got my choice here, and I'm going old school Universal Monsters, 1933, with The Invisible Man.
Shit.
I am a huge fan of Claude Rains, and he's the star of the film, but doesn't appear in the movie until the last minute of the film. It's one of those very odd sorts of choices that they made, because he's in bandages the whole time and invisible the rest of the time. So it's great, but his vocal performance is terrific. And this movie is funny. It's creepy. It is maybe a little creaky for the effects, but watching it, I can imagine watching it in the era that it was being made and thinking, I would have been frightened by some of the things that are going on here. I would have laughed at a lot of things, but I would have been creeped out by other things. And the footsteps in the snow and the clothes flying around, that's all a lot of fun. And like I said, the vocal performance by Claude Rains is terrific. Howard, you started to say something?
Oh, I was going to say if you ever want a good trivial question, it's what actor played the title role and was the central character in his very first film, but did not appear until the last few minutes of the movie.
Yeah, that's a good one. And
two things.
Go ahead.
On Invisible Man. One, you say creaky. It's from the 30s. But at the same time, the fact that they got invisibility down in the 30s, I think, is very impressive. I mean, we still have
I'm impressed with it for sure.
I could still count on one hand how many good werewolves I've seen in movies, but invisibility we got almost over a century ago. That's easy. So whatever. I mean, the effects look great in that regard. The other thing, compared to the other Universal horror monsters, Invisible Man has the highest kill count. He murders a train in that movie. He's so evil compared to all the other ones are just oh no, this thing is plaguing me and it sucks. Except Dracula, he's I just want people to come to my house and have a good time. But Invisible Man's I just murdered everybody and I don't care. He's dastardly. That's how bad he is.
And he's got the maniacal voice to go with it.
Yeah. To bring a bit of gravitas, my pompous look at films sometimes. A lot of these films are a critique of the modern period. And the modern period came about after the Age of Enlightenment and such. And they had the theory that not only did man not need God anymore, they could create a perfect world. So we have movie after movie after movie in these horror films where man tries to play God and completely fails and it destroys him, which is something that happens that ends the modern period with the bombing of Hiroshima. So these horror films at the time, often if you really want to know what's going on during a period, look at the B films, look at the genre films, and all these films were giving a warning that we're on the wrong road. But, no one listens to horror films.
I would think that we'd start listening, since a lot of horror films nowadays feature AI, and we should be listening. Holy criminy.
Yeah.
Well, my next choice, the first of the second round, is not an AI film, but it is the film that I saw most recently in a theater on Thursday night. Yes, Thursday night. I went to see a double feature. I didn't stay for the second show, unfortunately, because it was running late, but I did watch Rosemary's Baby from Roman Polanski, and that's my next choice.
Or as Mad Magazine said, Rosemary's Boo Boo.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it a boo-boo for sure, because I thought it was a very well-made film, and it's good and creepy.
Well, it takes it off my list because I had it on mine, so you got one of mine.
Did everyone?
Yeah, I think that's one of the essential horror films of the 60s for sure, and unlike Aaron, I wasn't trying to distribute them between every decade, but it may turn out that that's the way it ends up on my list. And Mia Farrow gives a terrific performance in this. I'm not a fan of hers, but I thought she was really good in this movie, and the makeup in the movie is great. And I'm not talking about the eyes of the devil who rapes Rosemary. I'm talking about poor Rosemary, who looks sick from the moment she gets pregnant, and she looks like she's wasting away, the exact opposite of most women who are pregnant, who put on a little bit of weight and carry with them a little bit of glow around them. Rosemary looks like she's, suffering from PTSD after a long service in the trenches in World War I. She just looks sallow and gray and emaciated, and you're wondering, wait, she's pregnant?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Mia Farrow either, but her expression in that last scene when she finally looks at the baby just conveys so much horror. I just thought that's an amazing shot, and they didn't even have to, because they don't even actually show the baby.
No.
And her face says it all, and that's a haunting image.
What was the second
I am
showing?
a big fan of Mia Farrow as an actress, not as a human being. I think she's an awful human being, but I think she is a marvelous actress, and she is great in this. As is, who steals the movie?
Ruth Gordon.
Ruth Gordon.
Cassavetes is good as a schmuck too. I like that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because, at times he comes across like he's all supportive and engaged with her, and they look like they have a great relationship in the first part of the film, and he becomes more and more obnoxious as the film goes on and more indifferent. And I can't imagine a contemporary woman either putting up with a husband like that or refraining from going to an obstetrician immediately with some of the issues that she's faced with. Talk about maybe being dominated by the patriarchy. Listening to that old man, Ralph Bellamy, keep telling her that it'll go away in a day or two, the pain that she's suffering, and she suffers for 6 months with this horrible pain. No, that's not the way that most women these days would handle it. All right, Dave Anderson, go ahead.
What was the film on the double bill? What was the other film?
Candyman.
That's a mashup. I mean, I love the movie, but it's like, what's the relevance between the two of them?
There was the
apartments that kill.
I think there was kind of a feminist perspective on the one, and the race issue on the other, and they were linked somehow. I'm trying to remember how he explained it, because the programmer did a little bit of an introduction, and I should have held on to the notes for that, but I didn't.
Marginalized voices?
Yeah, something like that. That's sort of what it was, giving voice to marginalized groups. Well, Dave Anderson, it's your turn again, so you get a pick. What do you want?
Okay. Well, I love anthology horror films, and I think the first one I ever saw was 1972's Tales from the Crypt, which I still love, and that movie almost made my list, but instead I went with the British film Dead of Night from 1945, because that one truly scared me and solidified my hatred of ventriloquist dummies. But the wraparound story has a bunch of people gathered at a country cottage, and they share their experiences that they believe to be supernatural. And, the film is most famous for the story where a ventriloquist is at odds with his own dummy named Hugo. And, he treats Hugo as if he were alive. And ultimately, it's a great psychological horror story, and the one that stuck with me the most when I was a kid. And back then, I found Hugo terrifying, and probably why I interpreted it as a straight horror story about a living puppet. I've seen the film a lot of times since then, and the segment still gets to me, and so do a few of the other ones. But I think my favorite story now might be the one about the two golfers competing for the same woman, which strikes my funny bone.
And was the segment that got cut out at one point.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, for the American, it was cut out for time, not
maybe,
because.
Maybe that's why it didn't stick with me when I was a kid. But it is on
like
the.
you, when I first saw it, I didn't see it with that one. I had to wait.
It holds up pretty well. It's certainly one of the more consistent anthology movies. And, since then, any movie or TV show featuring a ventriloquist dummy, and there's been some great ones like that one Twilight Zone episode, and even the 78 film Magic draws influence from that. It's just a lot of fun. It's a good movie.
I didn't catch up with Dead of Night until fairly recently. And, I mean, as an adult, the ventriloquist, when it stands up, that creeps me out. There's another shot where I believe he's, like, in jail or something, right? And, like, the dummy's with him. And there's, like, outside of it, you see all these other people, like, just staring at him also at the same time. That stuff gets me. And, like, having just seen Smile 2, I feel like there's a very deliberate reference to that shot. And I was like, I know what we're doing here. So, I mean, it's a movie that has a lot of influence for sure. I
always feel this as well is the linking story is actually fairly well done in this. It actually does link the stories together quite nicely and ends. It has quite a nightmarish kind of conclusion that, whereas a lot of the time, if there even is a connecting story, it's pretty naff. But as it was mentioned earlier, I do find this one of the most consistent anthology films because they can be, for obvious reasons, quite hit and miss. But yeah, this is a lot of fun. This one, it was in my short list.
I was going to say it's in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as a representative of the people in the world that use puppets, ventriloquists prefer the term figure to dummy. So check yourselves, people. Come on.
Oh. I was just going to say that you mentioned Magic, and I should point out that Richard and I covered both Dead of Night and combined it with Magic for my podcast, Pop Art. So
nice.
We also agreed it's one of the most, I believe we agreed it's one of the most consistent.
Yeah, no, we liked it quite well, and I'm going to agree with David about the framing story. I think that's really excellent, and I love the way it finishes off at the end, but where basically we're caught in a time loop. So maybe we'll get this on the Rewind podcast.
Yeah. There's another strong anthology film that's in my shortlist, but I don't know. It's a bit further down. I might not get to it, but it depends what everyone else picks. But we'll see what happens.
Aaron, we're back to you.
All right. Well, now I'm at the 30s then, and I figured I'd have my pick of one or the other of these, but I have my pick of both. So I'm going to go with Frankenstein. James Whale's one of his masterpieces. I mean, it's. With Frankenstein, I mean, along with just being the story that it is, much like Nosferatu, actually, the use of production design and shadow work and everything, along with the things like the lab and stuff like that, I find it just so impressive just to see these giant sets for their day and seeing them utilized in such a way that's so evocative and very compelling to see how it all works together to create the film that it is. I really like Colin Clive's performance as Dr. Frankenstein. I think he has this sort of manic energy that really plays well for him, especially in the sequel as well. When we talk about these Universal monster movies, obviously they're not specifically scary by modern standards for reasons, but the atmosphere in Frankenstein I think is so effective. Between the grave robbing or being by the windmill by the end, or any number of sequences in this film, I think there's so much control over how Whale's choosing to present the things that are going on, and obviously he runs wild a bit in the sequel, and he has more freedom to kind of do pretty much whatever he wants to, including tackling some interesting themes for 1930s. But Frankenstein, the original 31 picture, just wonderful, fantastic movie. Boris Karloff, of course, obviously mentioned as well.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find anybody who disagrees that this is a good choice.
The challenge with the Frankensteins is, which do I take?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Todd, which figure are you going to be putting on your lap now?
Well, I'm going to stick with the Universal as well, but I'm going to go to Creature from the Black Lagoon. which I mean, I guess you could say is the last great one when it comes to the Universal monsters. But the creature is just so unique. It's so different than the other stuff that Universal was doing. Very much sitting squarely in the 50s. But still drawing on the stuff that Universal had done before. You've got a great cast, of course, at the center of it, Julia Adams. Just the underwater ballet, basically, that you have between Julia Adams and Rico Browning playing the Gill Man. It's just such a beautiful scene. The Gill Man's always going to be one of the all-time great monsters for me, so I'm thrilled to have him on my list.
This film was actually a 3D movie, and I got a chance to see it on the big screen in 3D at the TCM Film Festival maybe 4 years ago, and it was terrific. And you're right, those underwater sequences are really pretty good, pretty spectacular, and it's creepy too when the creature just starts reaching out, and it would give you nightmares. One of the reasons that I think a lot of people have difficulty swimming in the ocean is because they can't see what's underneath them. And this might be the film that gave them those creeps from the very beginning.
He just wants love. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
he's kind of a sympathetic monster.
Yeah.
Well, Howard, do you have somebody that you were sympathetic for to put into your number 2 spot?
Well, not on the horror side, but on the regular people side. This was a movie that still scares me, but really scared the life out of me when I was young and first saw it. And in fact, even though I had seen it before, I made the mistake of watching it at home alone at night. Everybody else had gone and done something. I was still in my young teens, and that is The Haunting.
Oh, that was my next choice.
It's based on Shirley Jackson's novel, The Haunting of Hill House, and it's Julie Harris gives a knockout performance, and Robert Weiss, who directed it, just goes to town. And it's about a group of people, excuse me, that two of them have paranormal, some sort of paranormal powers. One's a paranormal investigator, and the other one is someone who's set to inherit this house. And unlike most haunted house movies, the issue isn't a ghost that lives there or a spirit. It is the house itself. The house itself is evil, which was a rather new idea. But there are some terrifying scenes even today for me. That just, when I watch it, I still just get really scared. We've covered this on Lambcast.
Yeah, we had, I think this was Movie of the Month maybe 6 years ago.
It was my first win at Movie of the Month, so...
and you definitely want to skip the 1999 version.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't, but,
I think what I like about The Haunting as well, I watched it when I was quite young as well, and it really, really worked for me. It's been a while since I've watched it, but it was that powerful. I do still remember certain sequences. I think what is cool about it is it's frightening without, from what I remember, you don't really ever see anything. It's done with sound design. It's done with some unusual camera angles. It's all power of suggestion, and it's just pure cinema to create that fear rather than just blood and guts or some kind of creepy looking murder or whatever. It's just using cinematic techniques and nothing else. And for that, it blew me away when I watched it. Again, I was probably a teenager as well. I loved it. So that would have been my next pick. I was like, oh damn.
I'm sorry.
My wife is one of the three people who actually enjoys the remake. And I tried to get her
divorce.
Yeah.
That's grounds for divorce.
I
Give it
considered
for now. She's only going to make you more unhappy.
Well, I tried to get her to watch the original, and she made it about halfway through and said, "No, I'm done." I can't watch this. This is scaring the crap out of me.
Oh, well, that's good.
Okay. Well, that's okay.
That's
That had a good ending.
Yes.
Not divorced.
That was not a feel-bad ending on that one, despite the fact that she walked out on the movie or canceled it. There's a good reason in this particular case, not that she prefers the other one, but because it scared her. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. All right, David, since you don't get to choose the haunting, you have to pick something else. What are you picking for your second pick?
Okay, well, and I get the wraparound, don't I? I get two.
Yes.
So, the first one I'm going to go with a fairly big one. This is a sci-fi horror. And it's the one I quoted from earlier. I'm going to go with Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
No!
Sorry.
I knew it was going to happen.
Obviously, well, it has to be the original, doesn't it? Because of the year thing. By Don Siegel. So, I'm sure most people know the story. So, pod people have come to Earth and are kind of quietly taking over. And we have... I'm trying to find the name now. Where is it on my thing? Kevin McCarthy is playing Miles J. Bennell, and he at first everything seems normal, but he starts to come across patients and neighbours who kind of claim friends and family aren't who they report to be, before promptly changing their mind a day or two later, and they gradually discover that there's these pod people taking over the bodies of everyone in town and ultimately the world. It's an interesting concept, and it's a concept that has been that is ripe for different kind of metaphors, different readings. I can remember when I was a kid, I used to, I think I'd read somewhere that and figured that it was a metaphor for the McCarthy witch hunts. But watching it again more recently, I kind of thought, actually, no, it might actually be more the other side, and it actually works almost stronger as a metaphor for the threat of communism in terms of when the film came out. So it can be read kind of either ways, and there's even different ways you can see it. The Jack Finney, who wrote the original kind of serial it was based on, whenever anyone asks him, he just said, he just wrote it as purely a good read, but I guess he'd probably say that anyway. And again, Don Siegel and the screenwriter Daniel Mainwaring, I don't know how to pronounce that, they kind of always said they never meant it as a left or right wing political statement, and they saw it as a comment on the blandness and conformity of kind of 50s life in America, which I can see that as well. So there's so many different ways you can read it, which makes it endlessly rewatchable, and it's a lot of fun. It's short and to the point and impactful. There's a couple of clunky bits. The bookends don't work that well, but you kind of feel like they were probably tacked on. And if the film would have ended on that scene when he's running down the street and he's shouting, they're here. If it ended
You're
there,
next. You're next.
Yeah, you're next. Sorry, yeah. If it ended there on that, the film would have been utterly devastating. And but it's so strong anyway. It's still a classic. And so it had to get my pick. I've gone for fairly personal picks, ones that kind of impacted me when I saw them. And this had to be up there.
Great pick.
Well, you're right. The ending was forced on them by the studio, and it would have been better without it. Again, Richard and I talked about all 4 versions of this on the Lambcast.
This was the
and
franchise.
You're right. It can be it can be reinterpreted in many different ways. Even the last one, which isn't good, if you see it post-COVID, it suddenly becomes much more interesting. It's also one of these where if you really want to know what's going on underneath the surface of the U.S., you go to the genre films, and this is one that really tells you how people are feeling.
We're overdue for a new one. We've got one every 2 decades.
Well, I was going to say, I'm waiting for it because if they follow the pattern, we've had 2 called Invasion of the Body Snatchers, then we had Body Snatchers, then we had the Invasion. So the next one's going to be called Of the.
Well, I'm going to get my tickets for Of the for sure.
We get Stars Borns and Invasion of the Body Snatchers every so often, so we're due for another Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yep.
I'm just glad that the studio didn't force a happy ending on the '78 remake, because that final shot is one of the scariest I've ever seen.
Damn right. And it has one of the best cameos from absolutely
coming in.
as if he's been running for 20 years, yelling the same thing.
All right, David, what's your wraparound? First on the third round.
Right, for this I'm going to go way back to 1922, and I'm actually going to talk about a film that, as I say, most of these are I've gone for more personal choices, but this is actually a film I only saw for the first time a couple of weeks ago, but it really blew me away, and I just thought I'm going to stick it in here, and that is Haxen, or Hexen, I don't know quite how to pronounce it. So yeah, this is
the way.
Yeah, it's an unusual, it's a very unusual film in that it's kind of, it could be called, as well as being an early example of a horror film, not the first horror film, but an early example, it could also be, it's actually really an essay film. It's kind of the first essay film. Well, maybe not, again, maybe possibly not the first, but first kind of famous one. And it's, Benjamin Christensen, who he directed it, he wrote it, he starred in it, he edited it, he produced it. It is his film. It's the auteur theory is debatable, but it's a film like this, it's hard to kind of ignore his presence. And it's kind of an essay on witches and witchcraft, and he kind of starts off almost like a slideshow kind of thing. You're looking at old imagery of evil and of the devils and the witches and things like that. But then he moves into his reconstructions, and he kind of reconstructs periods of history. And in particular, he moves into look at witch hunts and how some women would be called a witch and put to death and all this kind of stuff, and all the kind of trials they'd go through. Straightforward enough on the surface, but what makes it special is it is incredibly well made, especially the reconstructions. It looks gorgeous, especially it's been remastered in recent years. The version I watched was the Radiance Blu-ray, but I believe Criterion did it recently, and I don't know if they've probably got the same print. And it looks brand new. It looks crazily good shape. And it's got really low-key lighting. It's got some surprisingly effective kind of costumes and makeup and things. Some of these demons and devils look pretty terrifying still. And this was like pre-code and all this kind of stuff. So he kind of goes, Benjamin Christensen, and plus it was made in kind of Sweden and Denmark. He goes all out. There's some blatant kind of... The devil is quite often churning butter in quite a suggestive way, if you catch my drift, in some bizarre sequences. And you've got women queuing up to kiss the ass of Satan in a few scenes. It just goes all out there for a film that was made over 100 years ago. And as I say, the imagery is incredible. It's so atmospheric. It just absolutely blew me away. Just particularly visually. Just again, we're talking about cinematic qualities, kind of The Haunting. Again, it was staggeringly kind of well made for a film that's so old, and it just impressed me. And as again it's so unusual as well. It's not your typical. It does kind of have the stories within its reconstructions, but overall on a whole it is like a documentary. It's very, very unusual, but I found it really powerful, and I thought I'd stick it on the list.
Well, that was a technique they did back in the day where they would make something that was, under the guise of being a documentary or a cautionary tale or whatever, but it was basically their excuse to get away with a lot of nasty stuff on screen.
Yeah, you've got dead babies and all sorts of stuff, and this is crazy.
Well, there's a routine that Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks has, where Mel Brooks is playing a German director, and he talks about, well, we have to show all this sex and violence and everything so that people know not to do it.
I'm just glad
Hexen's a very enjoyable film. I remember seeing it, I think maybe back in college, maybe not. I remember being surprised because I believe there's female nudity, and I went, there's female nudity in this. But it's very entertaining. It is a very good film.
And there's many different versions as well. There was a famous one in the 60s, with that was called Witchcraft Through the Ages, and that's an alternative cut. It's shorter. It's got William S. Burroughs doing kind of narration over it, and a soundtrack by Jean-Luc Ponty and all this kind of stuff. So it's had different guises over the years, but I opted for the kind of old school original longer cut.
Did you see it in a screening, or was this a video?
It was a Blu-ray I got sent to review, so yeah, as usual.
Well, that makes sense.
I'm glad that Richard now has to add a film that has an umlaut in it over and over again on the next draft post.
Oh, I had to copy it from IMDb to get the umlaut, so put it in my table here, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to figure it out. I know that there's a tab for getting those other characters. I just keep losing it every time I click on something. Where to go?
Sometimes you can just hold the A down for a while and it pops up, but that might be a Mac thing. I don't know, but
could be. Well, I'm perfectly happy to steal. I'm going to be stealing the trailer for this film to put into our video of the podcast, because it looks pretty spectacular for something made in 1922. I was enjoying. I was hypnotized watching it while you were talking, and the very moment that you mentioned that they line up to kiss the devil's ass was the scene where they were lining up to kiss the devil's ass, and I went, "Yep, there it is, right there in front of us." Well, Howard, you don't have to kiss my ass to get your next selection.
Oh, too bad. I'm going rather more traditional here, and picked I Walked with a Zombie from 1943. This is one of the classic American horror films, directed by Jacques Turner and produced. It was one of the Val Lewton films made for RKO Pictures. The story goes that Val Lewton wanted to do the Jane Eyre film, which eventually got made with Orson Welles and Joan Fontaine. And when they said no, he said, "Fine, I'll just do my own Jane Eyre." And he did I Walked with a Zombie. And it's about a Canadian nurse who travels to a sugar plantation in the Caribbean to take care of the ailing wife of the family that owns the plantation. The wife is sort of in some sort of catatonic state, and she becomes involved with voodoo and The Walking Dead and things of that nature. It is so atmospheric. There's one incredible scene where she hears someone crying, and she goes out, and it becomes German expressionism at its peak. It is absolutely gorgeous to look at. The screenplay is very well written. It's actually very witty at times, very clever, very smart. This has so much going on in it that doesn't first appear on the surface.
I like the fact that he couldn't make the movie that he wanted to make, so he just remade it as a zombie movie.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, and Lewton, notoriously, I think that, like the studio would assign him titles, and then he had to come up with something for it, so.
Yeah, I actually watched this really recently, and I reviewed it on the website if you want to check it out. But it's just been released in a set alongside The Seventh Victim. But yeah, definitely, I enjoyed them both a lot. I slightly preferred The Seventh Victim, and I saw them kind of back to back, and I watched them the other way around for some reason. So I think I slightly preferred that, but I was still really impressed. I think what Turner is, he's very good with sound and music as well. There's really great use of the you kind of keep hearing the drumming, the kind of voodoo ritual drumming in the background of some of the scenes that really adds to the tension. And that scene when they're walking through the kind of long grass or the reeds or whatever, going to the ritual, and they see one of the other zombie in the darkness and stuff. It's incredible. It's some amazing sequences in that.
I like that the title feels like it's ripped out of a New York Post headline. I walked with a zombie. It makes me glad that Romero eventually came along and kind of redirected the zombie genre, just because I can only deal with so much.
It's also got
what kind of things it's dealing with in terms of race and voodoo.
I was going to say, it's also got a strangely unsettling use of a calypso song, which isn't something you can usually say.
Yes.
Which became really famous. It became a big hit, didn't it? The Shaman Scandal, or Fort Holland, whatever it's called.
And he became incredibly popular, and he's a wonderful singer. Yes. When you talk about the title, I always say it's one of the two worst titles for two really good films. Yeah. And the other one is I Married a Monster from Outer Space, which is actually a very good film.
All right, Todd, are you going to be drafting I Married a Monster from Outer Space as your next selection? Because it's apparently a very good film.
No, it is a good film. But no, I mean, this one's sitting right there. I can't not take it. The Birds. I'm going to take The Birds. My favorite Hitchcock movies all come in this time frame. I think Psycho, North by Northwest, and The Birds I would rank as my 3 favorite Hitchcocks. So I can't let The Birds slip by here if it's still sitting there. I mean, just the ultimate when it comes to animals attacks films, and I love how the film is so layered beyond that. The birds are kind of just an additional thing on all the other stuff going on in this film. A lot of cool stuff going on there. Jessica Tandy, completely creepy, and really raised the bar when it comes to effects stuff. The effects are amazing in The Birds. It's so well shot, and they handled the bird effects amazingly. So yeah, like I said, one of my favorite Hitchcocks.
One of the things
violent for its time too.
Yeah. One of the things I always found interesting is I did my at university I did my dissertation on the music in Bernard Herrmann's music in Hitchcock's films, and it was always weird when I because I didn't realize at first watching, but there's no music in the film. So you expected him to use Herrmann, but he actually did use Herrmann to help do some of the sound effects. But it's like they used kind of early. It's kind of like a sampler, like a synthesizer, I think, to use almost or something along those lines to do the bird sounds, and they kind of orchestrated it in a weird way and to do that instead of music. It gives the film a really strange tone, though, not having music, because it's so commonly used for horror to kind of amp it up. Really, it does a lot of heavy lifting.
Like Hitchcock has such great scores in his films. So here he's just denying you that, and instead he's giving you this very static experience from a sound standpoint, from a musical standpoint. But you have so many other things going on where it can like can or can't register, and then you realize as the creeping horror builds in, it's very effective. One thing's for sure, I'm never going back to Bodega Bay again. It's off my list of destinations to visit.
Yeah. And Todd, I agree with you that this was Hitchcock's best era, and The Birds has, in my opinion, the greatest sequence, and that's the scene outside of the schoolhouse with the children singing inside, and
absolutely,
the birds just little by little start just landing on the playground equipment, on the power lines. That's still a chilling scene.
It's wonderful. I probably told this story on the Lambcast before, but I have to again here. Back 30 years ago, when I first moved to Denver, there was a screening of The Birds going on at the movie theater just down the road from the apartment that my wife and I had moved into. So we're like, let's go see The Birds. And we go to see this, and it's not a full theater at all, but there, a good amount of people there. And sitting in front of us is a group of teenagers who I'm thinking probably heard, oh, this is some kind of horror movie. My parents have talked about this or whatever, so they went to go see it. So anyway, we watched the whole movie. We get to the end. We get to the scene where all the birds are out there outside the house, just kind of milling around, and they, the people all gingerly walk out, through the birds to try and get to the car. There's all this tension up. They get into the car, start the car, and pull out and roll away, and the end. And this, 17-year-old sitting 2 rows in front of me goes, "That's it?"
That was my reaction the first time too.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those
kids suck. I'm sorry.
It's one of those films that's definitely, it's promoted as a horror film, but it's a strange kind of horror film because it really, we don't know what's going on. We don't know why it's going on. It's not like there's a singular malevolent force that's happening. It's just nature, and not sure why nature is acting the way it's acting at that particular moment. And I like those kids' response. That's it. Completely. They're expecting a very traditional ending. They're not going to get it.
I hope they get birded to death.
Yeah.
On their way to the car, some crow pecks their eye out.
While they're popping in the Haunting remake to watch later on.
Or Birdemic.
Aaron, you're up.
Am I now? let's say I'm going to skip the 40s for now, and I'm going to go with the 50s and choose, because I'm very on brand and I still have this as one of my key ones that I wanted to pick, Godzilla, 1954's.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
You should have.
I'm actually surprised you didn't say Gojira and you said Godzilla.
I'm a massive Godzilla fan, as some may already know. The first one in particular is one of the few that I think qualifies as horror, along with being like sci-fi and whatever else you want to label it as, because hey, movies can be multiple things. It's not a crime. But the first one does have beyond having the sympathetic monster aspect to a point, even though Godzilla is just kind of nothing but destruction in this movie and doesn't really have a ulterior motive that reflects like, oh, I'm so sad. The atmosphere alone, the actual peril that we're watching the citizens of Japan go through as this giant monster just crushes them. Things that are de-emphasized in the American cut version that inserts Raymond Burr, the original 54 version as it stands. There's a certain kind of terror that I'll never understand because I'm not from Japan during that specific period of time, but the idea of making a movie like this post-World War II, post-Hiroshima, where this irradiated monster comes in and just smashes everything and causes all kinds of chaos and whatnot. I mean, that has to be a weird kind of feeling to have going to a multiplex as like a Japanese citizen and like seeing something like that for the first time. There's certainly a lot of innovation that happens with Godzilla. I mean, I don't need to explain that too much as far as the suitmation, the miniatures, and what have you. And I mean, one can, as we already talked about, like the Invisible Man, one can point to the effects and states like they're dated, but it's like I don't tend to use that kind of term because it just doesn't mean anything to me. It's like I'm watching the movie and experiencing like it the way I want to, and it's not a matter of whether or not I can see behind the curtain and figure it out. It's what is this movie trying to do? And I think Godzilla is just the spectacle it's putting on display from the time that it exists in within the context that they're going for. It's spectacular.
Mm-hmm. I think you've got to give a shout to the music as well.
Of course, yeah.
Akira Ifukube.
Mm-hmm.
It's so oppressive and kind of it's awesome. I love it.
The theme of Godzilla, the sort of triumphant theme that it has, like in the original movie, that's for the military. Like it's not for Godzilla. Yeah. It's just kind of like become Godzilla's theme, but like it's against him in the initial film.
This is one of those films that was on the midnight movie on weekends when I was a kid, and I remember seeing it laying on the ground in front of the black and white TV, watching it and feeling scared to pieces every time, especially at the beginning when they're dark and they're on the ocean and there's something ominous going on, and I'm going, what's going on? What? And it frightened me before I even saw the monster.
Mm-hmm.
What I always find interesting about Godzilla, as enjoyable as it is, but a lot of these early films are all about the atomic bomb. But what I found interesting about it is that, during the war, Japan took over Korea, they took over China, they tried to take over other countries. They did some of the most horrendous, awful war crimes there ever was, such as the rape of Nanking. But they're the innocent ones who are being attacked by this monster released by atomic bomb testing. So really, the U.S. is the villain, and I'm going, no. So I enjoy these films, but I always think it's funny when some of these films try to blame the U.S. for everything that went wrong or is going wrong in Japan.
It's always somebody's point of view.
Right. So I do have to shout out for Godzilla -1. It's one incredible Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
Sure is.
Well, that's where, I mean, Aaron, you were talking about how, the original Godzilla, qualifies as horror, whereas, as things move on, it maybe is leaning more towards the sci-fi stuff. But Godzilla -1 was definitely a return to horror.
Oh yeah, it's the first time there's a jump scare in Godzilla -1. I mean, like it tries to be horror. I think.
Dave Anderson, you're up next.
Okay, excuse me. I had to include one of the 1950s big bug movies, and I was going to go with the ant movie Them, but I've always been more afraid of. No, I've always been more afraid of spiders than ants.
Ew.
And so I chose Tarantula.
Oh, I watched this week.
It's a bit scrappier than Them, and the performances are, a little more histrionic, but it's one of the better big bug movies from the 1950s. It's directed by Jack Arnold, who did a lot of horror films for Universal back then, including Creature of the Black Lagoon. I first saw this on TV late one night in the early 70s and spent half the time covering my face. It was absolutely nightmare fuel for an arachnophobic 9-year-old, especially since the special effects were pretty convincing at the time, and in my opinion, they're still impressive today. This has a professor, a scientist who has good intentions by trying to create this synthetic nutrient that'll help feed the increasing population. But like all well-meaning scientists with radioactive chemicals at their disposal, his experiment results in oversized lab animals like mice and guinea pigs and a tarantula. I'm not sure what would possess him to want to inject a tarantula to make it bigger, and that's my arachnophobia kicking in. But the spider eventually escapes and grows bigger than a house and goes on an Arizona rampage. And the actual two main characters, Matt Hastings and Stevie Clayton, played by John Agar and Mara Corday, they don't really do much but hang on for the ride. But after killing a bunch of farmers and their cattle, the title creature starts threatening an Arizona town, and nothing seems to kill it. Guns don't work, dynamite doesn't work, and so they eventually call the Air Force in, with Clint Eastwood as one of the pilots, to try to hit it with napalm. I watched this again just recently. My wife popped in and sat down with me, and she laughed a lot at it. But even today, the special effects are kind of wonky in parts, but it still looks like a giant spider, crawling up the highway, towards town.
Yeah.
Spider movies
I watched
work.
it. Yeah, as I say, I watched it like 3 days ago. So no, yeah, I'm with you on this. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm terrified of spiders too. So I mean, it's just the simple fact that they used a real tarantula. Obviously, they used special effects to make it bigger, but it's because they used a real tarantula, you can't help but be scared of it if you are scared of spiders. So no, it worked a treat for me, and it's loads of fun. It's fun characters and well put together for the era. Good.
The Clint Eastwood classic, Tarantula.
As one that's owned a pet tarantula in various forms since age 10, I love I'm given my picks of all in monster movies so far, I think my love of monsters and things of that nature certainly shines here. And Tarantula's one where I'm like, yeah, great, give me more of this, please. We don't have enough big spider movies, I'd say.
The last one I saw in a theater was Big Ass Spider. That was, 5 or 6 years ago.
A little more than that at this point, but that's a fun movie. Yeah.
Yeah, spider movies work, I think, for the most part, because people have a natural aversion to spiders. And even if like you said, the images maybe don't always work as well as they should, it's just the concept. That's all you need to get it to work, is people thinking about a spider and the way they move. There's something just unnatural about it, and the idea that they're large, that's really creepy. Well, I can't go ahead.
Friendly, by the way, just to note.
Oh, your tarantula, yes. Most of
tarantulas in general, they're friendly creatures.
Most of them are not problematic, but I think people's instinct is to immediately pull back and go, ooh. But I'm glad you had a spider that you loved.
Love, I have it right now. It's over there.
That's a good deal. Good deal. I'm going with my next film from 1944, and it's a movie that I watched many years ago. We just happened across it in one afternoon evening, and I sat and watched it. I went, that was freaking creepy, and I was surprised at how effective it was. It's The Uninvited with Ray Milland. which is a ghost story. A man and his sister are interested in buying a house, and the house apparently has a haunting to it. There is a mysterious force that's going on there, and we're led to believe that it's one thing, and of course it turns out to be something a little bit different. And I just remember the overall effect of the movie. Again, it's like The Haunting. There's no gore in the film. There's no obvious violence. For the most part, everything is suggested with sound effects and camera effects, and you don't really get a lot of ghostly images, but you do get some spooky things with furniture and the wind and sound especially. And I think that it's a movie that is not as well known as it should be, and I think that this is an opportunity for people to go out and find it and enjoy it.
It's a film that is a lot of people's favorite childhood haunted house film if they happen to see it when they were a child. I remember seeing it, I think, Saturday afternoon or something. It does have it has this twist, as you say. I never remember what the twist is. I just always think, oh, it has a nice twist. It has a really neat twist, but I always forget what it is. It does have some odd things, like they have a dog that runs away, and the reaction to it is, oh, the dog ran away. I'm going, no, your dog ran away. What's going on there? Or that the sister suddenly shows up in a romantic relationship with, I think, the local doctor, who is like 40 years her senior. And I went, when did this happen? But yeah, it's a really fun, it's a really good movie. There's a great seance sequence and such.
I must admit, this is one I was slightly disappointed by. I watched it a couple of years ago. Another one I was sent to review. I think it was hyped up quite a lot. I'd heard it was amazing. I don't know. I found it a bit talk heavy, and some of the acting was a bit stuffy for me. But I don't know. It's one I should probably give another chance. I didn't hate it or anything, but it just didn't quite reach the heights I was hoping for. It looked nice though. I'll give it that.
You're not invited.
You're one of those kids sitting in front of me saying, "That's it."
Yeah.
It's okay.
Well, no, I usually go. I love a good haunted house movie, but I don't know. Again, it's probably expectations more than anything.
It's not a problem.
But yeah, it's weird how many of these films I've reviewed. You keep picking ones that are on my website, which is really cool. I don't think of myself as a big horror guy, but I've covered loads of these movies. But anyway.
Well, I think when it comes, since you picked before 1972, there's been so much time that has passed that what are the better horror films have sort of been reduced. And so that we're all choosing from the same basic pool.
Yeah.
Of horror films.
Well, speaking of a pool of horror films, I can't believe that in the pool, this is still available. We've already had one in the franchise chosen.
Here we go.
I'm fighting my desire to choose The Mummy, and instead I'm going to choose The Bride of Frankenstein as my wraparound.
There we go.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else.
We've already mentioned a little bit. It's a little out there. It's pretty wild. It's one of those films that whenever I get a chance to see it on the big screen, I make a point to do so, and I got that opportunity earlier this summer. So, it's a return to form. It's a little bit more sophisticated than the original Frankenstein. We get additional characters. There's still that odd sequence where, what's his name, Pretorius, thank you. Dr. Pretorius is introducing his little people in jars, and I'm not exactly sure how that all ties into everything that's going on, but I like that sequence anyway. I enjoy it. It's kind of funny.
It ties in perfectly.
It's a lot of fun. And the payoff at the end, the bride, similar to The Invisible Man, the bride does not appear in the movie until right at the end of the film, and she's revealed very briefly. And then the movie ends. And
au contraire. The bride appears at the very beginning.
Okay.
The bride doesn't appear until
Dr. Semantics is here as well, actually.
Yeah, there you go. So that's my wraparound pick. Dave, we're back to you.
Well, that's a great choice. I just want to say That's one of the greats from the 1930s.
One of the best sequels of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes.
I chose a movie that also has Ray Milland in it. And this is my absolute favorite Roger Corman movie, and that's X, the Man with X-Ray Eyes. I wouldn't say it's scary, but it's often really weird and does a good job building dread. And this is another cocky scientist, meddling with things he shouldn't. And Ray Milland plays Dr. Xavier, who's a brilliant surgeon, and he develops a serum that increases one's vision. And of course, he tests it on himself, and it ends up working better than he ever imagined. Soon he can see through things like clothes and even human flesh, which allows him to save a patient's life in one scene. And the more he uses the serum, the more he can see, which eventually starts to drive him a little bit mad. And when a colleague tries to intervene, he kills him and then goes on the lam. And he's using his powers as a cardiac, and then to win his
Jackson. He was on the podcast?
Huh?
Yeah, he goes on the lam.
Yeah, I get it.
I appreciate it.
And the entire time, his eyes start changing too, eventually turning completely black, which is really unnerving to a kid. When I first saw it. And the movie also comes to a really freaky climax where he rips out his own eyes, and the camera freezes on the empty sockets. And I was dazed getting over that scene. It looks a little silly today, that final scene, but and the movie's certainly a product of its time. But there's some great moments that are still kind of chilling. And during this point in his career, Milland was sort of slumming, doing a lot of cheap horror films, but he's really good in this one. His character is initially overambitious and arrogant, but by the end, he does manage to earn our sympathy because he's lost so much by his own doing. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun film. It's not perfect. It's definitely dated. But yeah, it's still got some shock power to it.
I never quite understood what happened to Ray Milland's career. Well, at the end of it, after not being able to become a successful director, he just starts doing all these B horror films, and then TV as well. And I never quite understood what he happened.
Yeah, well, Ray Milland is, an award-winning actor. He directed that film Panic in the Year Zero we talked about. I think that was a year ago. I don't remember what show it was on, but it was one of our collective shows similar to what we're doing here, and I remember liking it quite well. You're right, though, when he ends up with a second head planted on his shoulder, that suggests your career is not going in the direction that you would like it to.
One of the problems is he had the female problem of he was aging out of romantic leads, but still, I just never got it.
I don't know how many of you have seen an even older film called The Big Clock.
Yes,
right.
Love that film.
Which is kind of a film noirish movie where he's the star. He's incredible in that. If you ever get a chance to see that one,
I love that film. It's one of my favorites.
Another Hitchcock that we might mention. I saw him in Dial M for Murder this summer, also on the big screen, and he's quite good in that. Quite annoying. Well, his career is never going to fade. He's going to last forever. Aaron, you're on.
Oh, the optimism there is great. I could use that. That's wonderful.
I like to pump up all my guests.
I appreciate it. I'm out of monster movies for the time being, but I'm in the 60s now, and I had a few choices here, so I'm going to go with Kaidan. Masaki Kobayashi's spectacular anthology horror film. We talked about Dead of Night earlier. I'm a huge fan of horror anthology just because of the sort of risk involved in being like, we're going to show you 4 movies. You might like one of them. Kaidan I think is brilliant. It's 4 separate ghost stories. They're like folk tales. I think like the word Kaidan means ghost story. Beyond just like being like effective ghost horror filmmaking for the 60s. It's one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's so rich and vibrant with like color and very specific atmospheric choices throughout. It's a 3-hour movie. But it absolutely feels like having this on Criterion Blu-ray and ideally a 4K at some point. It's such just being able to look at this thing is just an amazing experience. I'd love to see this on a big screen. Like, it's such a beautiful film to watch, but it has like really cool stories, including like ones that have a lot of scale. There's some that have like a battle sequence that could stand up like a Kurosawa movie. Like, it's just like got a lot of like really cool stuff going on. Some really surreal imagery. It's a hard ask when I want to tell friends, be like, hey, watch some horror anthologies like Kaidan, this 3-hour Japanese movie. But at the same time, it's like I absolutely would love to recommend it to anybody because I think it's pretty brilliant.
It was annoyingly again. Somebody's taken my next pick. I was just about to pick this. So no, yeah, it's absolutely stunning. As you say, every frame is a painting. So I think it's just it's incredible. I also recently watched. I watched a film that was taken from the same source material as one of the anthologies. So they've actually expanded. Well, it's been turned to a few films, I think, but called I think it's just called The Woman in the Snow. But it's worth checking out that film as well. That's a very good kind of interpretation of that single story.
It's part of the KCU.
Yeah. It's fantastic film.
Todd, it's your turn.
Well, I feel like we need to get some Vincent Price onto a list here, so I'll take House of Wax.
Excellent.
Which I think is just a lot of fun. It's another 3D film. I got 2 3D films on my list. Yeah, pretty good for a guy that. I mean, 3D doesn't work on me terribly well. I've said it before. I'm the guy in Mallrats that can't see the sailboat. So
you're immune.
Yeah, I can see it, but it's just the effect doesn't work as well on me. I have bad depth perception. But no, House of Wax is so much fun. I mean, it's a great role for Vincent Price. It's just kind of the role that he just eats up, and it's wonderful color imagery. I love the gross goopiness of the wax, the bats of wax in this film. A lot of images that just kind of stick with you. The melting figures and the fire and all that kind of stuff, and of course, we've got that horror icon Charles Buczynski in this film, or I should say Charles Bronson as Igor, who actually I think is quite good in the role. But yeah, no, this is one of the first ones that comes to mind for me when I think Vincent Price. So yeah, House of Wax for sure.
I love those Vincent Price movies that all feature some kind of revenge plot that's going on, and this is sort of in that category. Another one, like you said, in 3D, that if you get a chance to see it in 3D, it's a lot of fun. I didn't see it. I did see it on the big screen, though, but they didn't have the 3D effect, damn it.
You kind of don't need it, like with the paddleball sequence and all that stuff.
The original,
which I love that. It's so cheesy.
The original from the pre-code one from the early 30s is also very good, and it's in color as well. One of the early color films has Fay Wray in it.
Howard, it's your turn.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
well,
it is.
I'm going to go body horror and foreign. And I'm going to choose Eyes Without a Face.
Mm-hmm.
From 1960. It's a French film directed by Georges Franju. It revolves around a plastic surgeon whose daughter is thought to have died, but who only ends up with her face really disfigured. So what he does is he starts abducting women and trying to do a face transplant with his daughter. It was very controversial at the time because the operating sequence is very detailed. It's very realistic, and something like that had not really been done before. but it's a very unnerving film. It's a very good film, and it's sort of one of the best fridge films of all times.
So, shameless plug for my podcast, but we're doing a new episode on French horror for this week's horror special. We do all these horror specials during October, and so I just caught up with Eyes Without a Face for the first time. I was impressed with how gory the film is.
Yeah, I was about to
say. Yes.
Because I know the later French films that I'm going to be watching are, shameless in the amount of gore they have, and I'm like, surely the early French films have a little more restraint, and I was wrong. It really shows you that surgery. Like, not even John Woo's Face Off shows you the surgery that detailed. Like, this one's like, here it is. Let's get that face off.
Yeah, anytime you've got something focusing on somebody's eyes, that creeps me out. I can't imagine. I don't understand how people put in eye contact lenses. And the thought of starting to screw around with somebody's eyes just it gives me the
start
creeps.
filming me putting in my contact lenses and sending the videos to Richard.
All right, David, you've got your fourth round and your final wraparound.
Well, I'm going to stay in France for my next film, and I'm going to go with a kind of a horror thriller. I think there's enough horror in there to get away with it, and that is Diabolique, or Les Diaboliques, however you want to pronounce it.
Screw you.
French.
Sorry. So, yeah.
That's my next one.
This is Henry Georges Clouzot. I don't know. I'm terrible with French, so I've pronounced that horribly, but I don't care. But, yeah. So, it's about an unlikely pair of women, Christina and Nicole, who they plot to kill Christina's husband, who's like a cruel headmaster called Michel. They're an odd couple because Nicole was Michel's mistress and Christina was aware of this, but they kind of team up to kind of get their own back. They plot to kill him, and they seemingly, the plot seems to go smoothly until Michel's body goes missing. And then Christina starts to, the fear in Christina builds from this, on top of the kind of guilt of what she's done, and it goes on from there. And yeah, this is a film I've seen a couple of times, and it just kind of gets, maybe 3 times actually, and it just keeps getting better the more I see it. As I say, it kind of sounds more like a thriller on the surface, but there's some really unsettling, some very tense scenes. The early murder of Michel earlier on. There's some great use of water, particularly. There's a scene of the bathtub in that's just terrifying. And it's just a stunning film. It's like a lot of the ones we've mentioned. It looks great, but I think a big thing about it is the tension is just palpable in this. It's a riveting watch. It's told quite economically too. There's not a lot of fluff getting in the way of the story. It's not necessarily rush or like fast paced, but it's just it just kind of sticks with what's important, with the tension, with the kind of psychological drama in play, rather than throwing in lots of extra subplots and romance and all this kind of crap. So it's brilliant film. So I had to.
The final scene is absolutely terrifying.
Oh yeah.
It's really scary. Alfred Hitchcock wanted to do this, but he got outbid. So instead he did Vertigo. Vertigo's a better movie, so I guess in the end that's fine. I wish he would have been able to do both. But no, this is a really good film on its own, even outside of whether Hitchcock did it or not. It is very unnerving and very scary.
Nice.
It's a slow burn too, just so everybody knows.
It's the next French film I'm planning to catch up with.
Nice.
It was one on my list of shame for a number of years, but I did finally catch up with it a couple of years ago, and I was very impressed with it. I think that you've got a good choice here. Is your final choice also going to be in French, or are we finally going to be speaking English here?
No, we are speaking English. We are. We're going to go back to James Whale, who's cropped up a few times in this list, and this is one.
Oh no!
Sorry. And I'm going to go with a film that he made in 1932 called The Old Dark House. Sorry. Ruining your list in 2 fell
all
swoops.
All sorts of mean things I'm saying to you right now.
Sorry. But this is one I mentioned earlier that I love a good kind of haunted house movie, and this just is one of the best. It's barrels and barrels of fun. It opens in classic horror movie fashion. With the Wavertons and their friend Pendrell, they're lost in a storm, and they're attempting to drive to Shrewsbury. And when they've just about given up, they come across this building, knock on the door, asking for shelter, and they're not given the best of welcomes. They've got Boris Karloff meeting them at the door, giving them a fright, and the owners are rather reluctant to let them stay, but they're getting there, and all kind of spooky shenanigans goes on from there, and. As I say, it's a lot of fun. It looks nice. It's got some creepy shenanigans in there, but I think it's more, as I say, it's been a while since I've seen it now. It's a bit camp. Yeah, it's a bit camp, it's a bit silly, but that's kind of why I liked it. It's just a lot of fun. It's got comedy in there. But it still has some surprisingly kind of shocking bits here and there. As I say, in Boris Karloff, he's not playing an actual monster this time. He's just a really creepy kind of big butler with a scar on his face. But it gets fairly brutal in places. But the main thing for me to take from this is just fun. It kind of just barrels along, and I could watch it any day of the week.
It has this incredible cast, not just Boris Karloff. It has Melvin Douglas, Gloria Stewart, Charles Lawton, Ernest Thesiger, Raymond Massey. How do you get all those people? Of course, these were sort of before these people were necessarily big, but I'm just thinking, how do you get all these people in a horror movie like this at one time? And it is a fun movie. It is a bit campy on purpose. They knew what they were doing. They weren't trying to be completely serious. But yes.
Well, clearly Howard was ready to talk about this film because he wanted it.
Sorry, both of my picks.
So Howard, you're going to have to settle for something else as your final pick. What have you got?
Okay. I'm going to choose one that's a little less known, I guess. I sort of came up with this last minute because I realized I had only chosen 3 or 4 that came before 1972. But I'm going to go with Night of the Demon, or the U.S. title is Curse of the Demon. It's a British horror film from 1957, again directed by Jacques Turner, and it stars Dana Andrew. And it's about an American psychologist who is coming to London for seminars on cults and satanic cults because he's not a believer. He's someone who debunks them. But while there, he meets this expert, someone who claims to be part of the occult, and he gets past this piece of paper with some ruins on it. And the basic premise is that if he doesn't get rid of that paper and give it to someone, even without them knowing it, this creature is going to come after him and kill him. Of course, at first he doesn't believe it, but as time goes on, he starts to realize, I've got to find a way to get rid of this. Has a very clever ending as to how he does manage to get it, but there are some really creepy and scary moments. It does unfortunately begin with showing the monster. This was not the director's idea, and the writer says if he ever met the producer again, he'd shoot him. But it's one of these very creepy, more by suggestion than showing anything, because theoretically the monster is never supposed to be shown. But I highly recommend it.
I saw that for the first time on TCM about a year ago. It was really good. I've always been a Dana Andrews fan, and I enjoyed him in this one.
Yeah, and it's Jacques Tourneur again. He's just so good at atmosphere. That's the big thing I get with his films, and this is full of it. It's thick. I enjoyed this one too.
Well, I'm going to stick with the title Curse of the Demon because I just watched Night of the Demons, which is the 1986 or 88 film. It's terrible, and I don't want anybody to get confused with those. So Curse of the Demon is what we're looking for, not Night of the Demons.
Oh, it's good. They changed the title of the U.S. because I can't remember which film, but Night of the Demon, I think, was too close to an American film that had come out at that time, so they didn't want to confuse anybody.
Well, Todd is never confused. He knows exactly what he's going to choose for his final pick.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I do, because I've been holding on to this one. I figured that this wasn't going to get taken by anyone else. But I always say I kind of saved the last slot just kind of as a personal choice. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue down the Frankenstein path because, you know, Frankenstein got taken and Bride of Frankenstein got taken, and both worthy choices. But my favorite Universal film is the third entry, Son of Frankenstein. So I'm going to take that one because I always think that too many people stop at Bride and they should continue on to Son of Frankenstein. I think it's a lot of fun. It's Karloff's last appearance as the monster, and he does a great job again. Basil Rathbone is playing the title character, the son of Frankenstein. But this movie belongs to Bela Lugosi as Igor. In my opinion, this is Bela Lugosi's best performance. Igor is just completely creepy in this film. I mean, usually we think of Igor as being like this, you know, sniveling, yes, master type of thing. But, you know, Igor in this film is one of the great villains of the Universal Monster series of films. And, I mean, I love Lugosi as Dracula, but I will take his Igor over his Dracula any day. You've got a lot of other good things going on. I mean, also, I need to mention Lionel Atwill in this as the inspector. This is where, if, you know, like in Young Frankenstein, the whole bit with the mechanical arm, it comes from this movie and his character. A lot of cool stuff with like the set design stuff, very much pulling from German expressionism and such. So yeah, I mean, this one doesn't get as much praise as I think it deserves, but Son of Frankenstein, if you lined up all three Frankensteins, or not all three because there's more, but it lined up the first three Frankensteins from Universal and said, which one do you want to watch tonight? I'm going to go to Son because I love Son of Frankenstein.
On pop art, I keep mentioning pop art. My guest chose Jurassic Park, and I chose all three of the Frankenstein films. We watched Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein, because they're all about scientists who think they can create life and do what they want, and it ends up that they can't. But what I find interesting in some ways about the progression of the films is you look at the houses that they live in. And in Frankenstein, it's actually a rather small mansion. Then in Bride of Frankenstein, when they had more money, it becomes this huge place. And in this, as you say, it's Germanic expressionism. It's all very Teutonic. It looks the decor looks very German. And suddenly the film becomes a metaphor for the rise of Nazism and the attempt to create the perfect, the Superman, the perfect soldier, the perfect person. And I always just found that progression very interesting because it was in 1939, and I think this is all just a metaphor for Nazism.
I love The Son of Frankenstein. It's a great movie, and I'm a big fan of Basil Rathbone, so I appreciate your choice here. And I think you're right about Bela Lugosi in this role. I'm not sure I would prefer it to Dracula, but I think it is maybe one of his best roles. And yeah, Igor's a better villain in this. He's not just a snivel. He's a bad guy, clearly. Mm-hmm. Aaron, you're not a bad guy. What have you got for your last choice?
So I skipped the 40s, and I'm going to keep skipping the 40s. I'm going to go to the 70s. I thought about it, and I was thinking the clean line that I could get through, but I think I'm going to go head towards the 70s. And I'm going to go with Wes Craven's directorial debut, Last House on the Left, which is got all kinds of things going. It's Craven's debut. It's produced by Sean Cunningham, who would go on to make the Friday the 13th. And of all things, it's like based on the same story that Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring is based on. And so it's got all those things that every audience would want, right? The content of this movie is quite harsh because it's a rape revenge story, and things do not go well for a very innocent person. But in terms of Wes Craven getting his feet wet, I'm a guy that I've always felt that Craven is more of an ideas man than a great director. That's not to take away from his successes that he has had. He certainly has a lot of films I really like, but I'm not as huge on some of his more notable works compared to others. But The Last House on the Left, like, despite having some goofy cop stuff towards the end that kind of upsets the momentum, which I think comes from his inexperience more than anything. I do think at its core is obviously a very rough story to watch because it's a rape revenge film, but there's a very contemporary way he's attacking it, and so it has a certain in-your-face quality that I think does get the horror of the situation across beyond just the idea of what the content is to begin with. And it's certainly, as a start to a career that would lead him to be called, master of horror, whatever name they want to throw at Craven. It's a very effective way in putting him on the scene in that regard. Craven, I believe he was a professor, among other things. He's a smart guy, and the idea that he'd kind of delve into the genre stuff like this at a time when I think was this in the Dave may know, was this in the video nasty category given like the content of it?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it was. It was unavailable in the UK for a long time.
For a long time, yeah.
I can remember being really impressed because when we went when I was at uni, we went to Amsterdam as most university students will do in Europe, and we I remember finding a copy of it on DVD and was like, yeah, and brought it home. But I think it got released not long after that. But still, I got there first. Yeah, it was on the list.
So yeah, it's got a lot of stuff going on. But in terms of like just filmmaking, like it's affecting. And the main like baddie Krug, played by David Hess, is just one of the most repugnant characters in horror cinema. It's one that stuck with me as far as Craven's work is gone for sure.
Oh, I so hated this movie.
That's a fair reaction.
It's I've seen a lot of horror films in my life, and that's one of the few that I'm watching this and I'm going, I can't take this, which is probably what makes it effective. I agree with you about Wes Craven. He's more driven by ideas than filmmaking skill. He eventually got to be, I think he became a better director after this one.
I'd agree.
This one's driven more by audacity than ability, and I just can't take this one. That right down to the production values. It's just never again.
Yeah, I must admit I'm a bit the same. Although I was excited about finally picking it up when I finally watched it, I must admit I'm on more in your camp. But it's not my kind of film. I'm not into. We'll probably get into this a bit later in the show, but just kind of deeply kind of nasty, unpleasant, grubby kind of films, especially rapey films. I don't know why anyone wants to watch them. So I'm just like, yeah, it was a chore for me. So no, not my kind of film though at all. I do quite like Virgin Spring, but I just think, yeah, it's got a bit more artistry in that one.
There's an Italian Gaia version of the same story called Night Train Murders that was on Criterion. It is extremely unpleasant, but very, very effective. And you might want to check that out.
Yeah.
Dave Anderson, we've gone from something that you can't stand. What do you like that you would like to include as the final film on your list?
Well, since Invasion of the Body Snatchers was snatched, thanks, David. I'm going with The Incredible Shrinking Man. It's another sci-fi horror film that's smarter than its title, with an intelligent story and believable characters and a bleak, understated denouement. It's about this guy named Scott who's exposed to a mysterious mist while on vacation, and it renders him increasingly smaller. But to me, what ultimately drives the story is Scott's psychological descent into, not quite madness, but self-loathing, then anger, even alienating his wife, before becoming completely isolated, both by his own choosing and through his circumstances. And by the final act, he's motivated more by pure instinct, and he grudgingly accepts his fate and his uncertain future. It's kind of a psychological journey, not unlike the stages of grief. Of course, what most people remember are Scott's violent clashes with Butch, his cat, which I suspect is how a real cat would react when spotting his old roommate reduced to 3 inches. As much as I love cats, I'm pretty sure my own would have a great old time battering me to death, no matter how much they actually like me. And then there's that angry spider in the basement, which is a fight to the death, which Scott actually instigates because they're fighting over, I think, a chunk of bread or something like that. Incidentally, that spider is the same one that was used in Tarantula, officially making him the only arachnid with a bona fide film career. Those scenes are still a lot of fun, and the special effects are still pretty impressive for such an old movie. But the real horror is what Scott has become, and it's got a voiceover coda that's a little bit overwrought, but it's effective. And like a lot of other movies, Universal originally wanted a happier ending, but I think a major reason this film works so well is that it doesn't let the viewer off the hook, leaving them maybe even a little more distressed than Scott's fate over he appears to be. So viewed in the context of when it was made, Incredible Shrinking Man was actually pretty damn dark for a 50s horror movie.
But the scene I remember most, other than the two you mentioned, is when he's now living in the dollhouse. And his wife is going out, and she's going out just to do shopping. And he cross-examines her and says, where are you going? Who are you meeting? What's going on? And for a while, this now becomes a metaphor for a man losing his place in the home, where the women are becoming like the breadwinners, or they're running the house, or they're responsible for everything. And his reaction is just to try to find a way to have more control over her. And I just thought that was an incredibly well-written little scene.
It was.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's agree with everything you said. Really, it's
and this is another one that
moving.
This is another one that Criteria did a Blu-ray of a few years ago, and it's also been restored really nicely. It's a great-looking film, the Criterion, excuse me.
Well, we're going to finish off with something that's not incredible. It's not going to be a classic. It's not one of those films that everybody loves and adores and thinks ought to be on your essential list. I've already got two films from the Universal era of the 30s on my list, so I'm not going to go with a third. Instead, I'm going to go with something, like Todd said, maybe reserve a spot for something a little bit more personal. And I've got one that falls in that category. It'll be something that I can refer people to my other page with, and that's 1971's The Brotherhood of Satan.
I knew you were going to work this one in there, Richard.
The Brotherhood of Satan is a low-budget horror film directed by L.Q. Jones and starring Strother Martin, who is the subject of one of my other blog posts. Strother Martin he was a relative of my mother's, and he's somebody that I had met when I was young, and I always followed his career thoroughly. He at one point lived with my mother and her family when he was going to school for a period of time, and they always referred to him as Jay, so I always think of him as Jay, not Strother. But he's a great character actor who didn't get a lot of chances to be the star of the film, but this was his first starring role. He's listed as the star, although his part is, I think, for the most part, supporting. This is a weird film about a group of people, a family that ends up in this town that they can't escape from, and the children in the town are disappearing, and it's basically a coven of witches is replacing themselves with the children in the town. And the reason the family can't leave is because they have the right child to fill out the coven. And the families that are losing their children, they are being decimated by toys that come to life in large size, and so it's a little strange. It's a little confusing in the first 10 or 15 minutes, but once you get the idea about what's happening, I think it makes a lot more sense. It's got a very creepy vibe, and when we get to the final scenes where the coven is actually engaging in their ritual, it's off the wall. Yeah. It's just a little strange, and Strother appears as the benevolent town doctor at first, but we discover that he is in fact the head of the coven. So,
well, of course, he's Strother Martin.
Yeah, what are you going to do? So,
I never actually saw this until Arrow Video sent me the Blu-ray to review a few years ago, and I wasn't expecting much, but it does achieve a dark, surreal tone, not unlike Rosemary's Baby. That includes a similarly, ominous resolution. I was actually really impressed with it.
Yeah, we did this on the Forgotten Film Cast. Richard was my guest. So that's why I kind of had, as I was looking through films, I thought, is Richard going to work the Brotherhood of Satan in there? I mean, it's Strother Martin. I feel like he's going to do it. But yeah, I mean, Strother Martin is just eating it up in this film. He just is having the time of his life. So it's a fun one to watch.
So there you have it, folks. A list of films that some of you are going to be very familiar with, a few that you won't be familiar with, some that you definitely should seek out, and some that people are warning you about. It might not be your cup of tea. So be careful about that. We're going to take a quick break to hear from a fellow Lambcast podcasting show, and then we'll be right back with our exit question of the week.
Hey, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Abe.
And together we host
Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
Hey, we pulled that off.
Hey.
This is a weekly review show, right? We talk about movies on a weekly basis.
And other things.
Yeah, we have commentary tracks, we have lots of guests.
A lot of bonus episodes, a lot of game talk, a lot of sports talk.
Yeah, somehow sports talk factors in there along with Simpsons references for whatever reason.
So give us a listen. We're everywhere podcasts are found.
Yeah, they're everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
Coming live.
Sometimes? I think it's in there. I can edit that together. Yeah.
We're back, and it's time for our exit question of the week. It's really simple. There are a lot of films that we've talked about today that fall into a variety of genres, and so I thought that maybe that would be something that we could talk about. So what are your favorite and least favorite subgenres of horror? We're going to start with Todd. Todd, what do you like? What kinds of films do you want to see, and what kinds of films do you avoid?
I mean, I think my favorite would be just in general saying monster movies. I mean, like I tend to have a real soft spot for like the Universal monster stuff, and so you have Frankenstein or a Mummy or Dracula or something like that. Those are the ones that I tend to enjoy. If I'm going to say least favorite genre of horror, I definitely am not a torture porn type of guy. That's just not my style. So yeah.
Yeah, that'll be on my list. Torture porn is not one that I go to first. Although I do like a popular one. I do like gore movies. I do like some of those with the eye popping, but I prefer it if it's a zombie's eye that's being popped out as opposed to somebody who's having it surgically removed.
Yes.
Aaron, how about you? You got some a favorite genre and one that you don't really care for?
Sure. I do love horror in all respects because I think there's just good examples in every category. But if I'm looking at like a favorite, if I'm looking at one where I'm like, I'm generally more interested in this kind than others, I do like my share of zombie movies. I do think the best zombie movies are ones that obviously use the zombies as a metaphor or what have you, and there's just a greater story going on in terms of the social dynamic. And obviously Romero's films, the early ones especially, have that going for it in spades. Along with many others. So like that tends to be what I lean on, which I guess falls into monster movies, which we've talked about plenty, so I don't need to like keep that conversation going. And Todd just literally talked about monster movies. So like, yeah, I'd probably like lean there, although there's plenty of other things. It's not even like the frightening factor. Like if I was going like, what are the horror movies that scare me? I don't know, probably Home Invasion just because it's the most like realistic. But zombies tend to be my...
Do you prefer fast zombies or slow-moving zombies?
Like, I could say I prefer slow-moving zombies, but at the same time, it's more of what the movie's offering. Because, like, I think the 28 films are quite good, and I like Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake is still his best movie. So, like, I have nothing against Fast Zombies, because the examples that I've seen tend to be pretty good movies to begin with. So I'm not even World War Z, I think, works for what it's doing, despite not really being the book. Least favorite genre. It's not even least. It's just more of one that doesn't affect me much. It tends to be like possession films, specifically like Christian possession films. Because one, I'm just not Christian, so I don't have like a lingering threat of oh no, religious iconography is getting to me. But also the idea that The Exorcist is so fantastic, where it's like any other possession film is not The Exorcist. So it's like it's hard for any other film to kind of compare when you have one that has set the mold and like so become such a dominant force within that realm. So when I see other possession movies, like, well, I don't need to compare it to The Exorcist, but it's like, say with like Jaws, like there's plenty of shark horror films, but there's only one Jaws. It's like there's not another one that like matches up. It's like, oh, is this going to be the next Jaws? Like, no, there's still not been one. And The Exorcist is so kind of singular in what it's done, where other movies involving the same kind of thing, it's like, yeah, okay, good try, like, I guess, like, but I can't. Not many leap to mind where like this is amazing. Just like, yeah, okay, it's a decent one, maybe at best.
All right.
So yeah, that's where my head goes.
I gotcha, and I'm not taking the bait on that Jaws reference, by the way. David Brook, how about you?
It's horrible. When a monster kills a child in front of everybody, making everyone scared of the water for decades, that's a horror movie.
It's the scariest film I've ever seen, I think. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Okay, for me, I guess I've mentioned this a few times already on the show. I kind of like classic. I like a classic haunted house movie. I like ghost stories. I kind of like more kind of creepy, not quite seen, kind of atmospheric horror. I'm not as keen on super nasty kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely kind of ghost stories, haunted house movies are my favourite. And for least favourite, it's come up already, but yeah, torture porn. And I think just generally kind of nasty films. I don't understand films that are kind of grueling because you're watching someone go through something horrible. I just don't understand why people want to watch them. I do watch them occasionally and they can be powerful, but I would never kind of out of choice just stick it on. But I think, yeah, and in terms of gore, it's not necessarily just a gore thing. I like gore in comedy horror. I like gore that's over the top. I love like Brain Dead and Bad Taste, the early Peter Jackson movies, or Dead Alive, I think it's called in America. I like gore when it's over the top like that, but when it's just watching someone go through horror.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean. I saw last night on the big screen Return of the Living Dead, and there's a lot of gory stuff in that, and it's humorous and easy to take as opposed to something that is torturous. Dave Anderson, how about you? You got a favorite category?
If I had to pick one, I think it would probably be the ones that combine science fiction and horror, like Frankenstein and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and some of the modern classics like The Thing and Alien and Event Horizon. I even thought Pandorum was a criminally underrated film. There's just something about technology and horror that, to me, go together like coffee and donuts. So I really enjoy the sci-fi horror hybrids. My least favorite, again, if I had to pick one, would probably be found footage. There's been some great ones. I loved The Bay. And I think As Above, So Below is kind of an underappreciated found footage film. But ever since the Blair Witch Project, it's been an overused novelty that has long since worn out. My patience wears really thin for most of them, and I'm sent a lot of them to review on my site. And I'd say 8 times out of 10, they're just a cheap way to get into the movie business.
Well, I've found a few that work, like you said, but there's a lot that don't quite make it. And it is a cheap way to get in, but if you're creative, that's one of the nice things about those films, that it's somebody is forced to be creative because they don't have any money, and they find a way to make something that works anyway. Blair Witch, by the way, did not work for me, but there are plenty of found footage films that do work for me. Howard, how about you? A favorite and least favorite?
I think in some ways it's the same. My favorite and least favorite genre are the same. And that is Living Dead movies. When Dawn of the Dead opened, which I thought was just an incredible movie, and then I saw Night of the Living Dead, I was really into these zombie films. I would watch all of them, that were coming out that I could. And somewhere along the line, I started going, wait a minute, these films ultimately make no sense because the zombies should be rotting away. And all you have to do is outweight them, because eventually their bodies will just decay, because there's no way they can keep on going. And they never did, and so I sort of got tired of the whole thing. And the ultraviolence at times also sort of got to me. But still, every once in a while, you come out with these incredible new interpretations. You have Shaun of the Dead, you have Train to Busan, you have World War Z, and other films like that. So it's really, Warm Bodies. So I'm really kind of have this love-hate relationship with Living Dead movies. I will also echo torture porn to the extent that I've never really seen a torture porn film because I just don't want to, because there's just something about the idea of the torture porn movie that just so turns me off. I might like them if I saw them, but I think I'd have to agree with people on the torture porn. But it's Living Dead that I both love and hate.
I know what you mean by that with the kind of zombie movies. I think it's one of those things where if it's good, I love it, but a bad zombie movie, I just can't be bothered with. Whereas a bad, maybe like Ghost Story, or a bad, I don't know, some other types of horror, kind of more of a schlocky kind of gory horror movie. If it's bad, I'll probably still enjoy it and still watch it. But a bad zombie movie, I just find them kind of boring. They just hit the same kind of beats, and yeah, so I know what you mean on that.
Well, I think the zombie movies are also another one of those ones, like the found footage films, that are easy to do because they are relatively simplistic in their concept, and as long as I think people get into them because they like the makeup effects. And I
think we're liberally using easy too much as far as.
By the way, making a film is not easy. Making a film is not easy. I didn't mean to imply that it's easy.
Slap one of these together, no problem. It's like, you can make a drama that's set in one location for cheap. A horror movie requires a little bit of effort.
Yeah, no, but they offer fewer obstacles to finance, script, casting. You can get by with a lot of shortcuts in those kinds of movies. I don't mean to suggest any movie is hard to make. Hey, I can barely do this podcast and get it posted, so I'm never going to dismiss the work that somebody does, even on a terrible film. They worked on it. Their goal was to make something that they thought was good. If I dislike it, that's my opinion. That's all it is.
Finance is the key thing, because horror sells. Because people make movies on their phones. I mean, it's not hard. If you want to make a movie, you can make a movie. I mean, it's.
I guess in a way they're a little easy to write as well. They have a bit of a template. I guess you could say that with a lot of genres, though. They can have templates, but
yeah. Well, my favorite are the revenge kind of monster films. Think of any Vincent Price movie in the last 15 or 20 years of his life, his active career, and you've probably got something there. Theater of Blood, The Abominable Dr. Phibes.
I love Theater of Blood.
Those kinds of films where somebody is seeking revenge on another group. House of Wax kind of fits in that category too. I like those ideas where there's somebody who's got an axe to grind, and then the way they do it is with an axe. So I kind of enjoy those. And then I've already mentioned that my least favorite are the the ones that the focus is on torture. In other words, look, I've just said somebody's using an axe in a revenge movie. I'm okay with that, but I don't want it to be slow and torturous. I don't want it to be taking its time. I don't want the cycle. The thought of anticipating it is a little bit tough. I have not been. I say I don't like them. I've avoided them. But I just watched the first 2 Terrifier movies this week, and a lot of that is just about, torture kind of stuff. And it doesn't frighten me. It just repels me. And I want a horror film that frightens me, and not just that turns my stomach. So,
I'll say this about, because we've been talking around this, it seems like, because I am big on the Terrifier, specifically the second and third one. The first one is a showcase for effects and an introduction of the character Art the Clown. Art the Clown is what gets me going in these movies, because beyond the fact that he's mutilating bodies or what have you, I think his physical performance that's taking place, David Thornton Howard, I believe, it's the best of those I've seen since, like, Robert Englund. He's so compelling to watch as a mime that murders, essentially, in a clown outfit. Like, there's something there because I can agree with you guys to an extent, as far as I don't specifically seek out these ones that are trying to ram in the gore at you and whatnot to make you just feel uncomfortable or what have you, which is why I'm super looking forward to some of these French films I'm going to watch. But what these movies specifically, again, the second and third, because they're so much heavy on lore and character as well as the mutilations, it's like, for whatever reason, I've been won over. And a lot of that comes from how they're choosing to do it with this character.
Oh, I think the character is an interesting one. And the visualization, like you said, the first one is it's about the makeup design and the effects that they're working on. And I think that that's why a lot of people get into the horror film genre, is because they are fascinated by the makeup effects and the way they work. And I appreciate that a great deal. Not to dismiss the work of CGI artists, but I appreciate the practical effects so much more.
As we're talking, by the way, I just want to note that there's a good chance Terrifier 3 will probably gross more than Joker sequel domestically, which makes me all kinds of happy. It's the best murder clown movie I've seen this month, and so anything that can take down Joker is fine.
There you go. There's a silver lining somewhere. Well, before we make our exit, I want to give everybody a chance to promote things that they would like our audience to see or listen to. So let's get into that. Todd has left us, but Aaron is still here. Aaron, what have you got that people could turn their eyes or ears to?
Well, since Todd did leave, I'll just note that he has this show, Forgotten Filmcast, which is very good. I'm happy to have been guest on it a few times. I think some of you guys have too. As far as my work goes, I host the podcast Out Now with Aaron and Abe. We talk about weekly movie releases, but we have a lot of bonus fun as well, including especially in October, where we have a lot of special horror-themed bonus episodes. We've talked about one-hit horror wonders. We had a Babadook 10th anniversary special. We're talking about French horror, as I mentioned earlier, and we're doing a commentary for The Ring, Gore Verbinski's version this month as well. So a lot of stuff going on over there on Out Now with Aaron and Abe. And I am the editor-in-chief at We Live Entertainment. You can find all my movie reviews over there, and everything I do ends up on my Substack page, thecodeofzeke.substack.com. And I'm on all the socials at Aaron's PS4.
Very nice. David Brook, how about you? What's going on at Blueprint Review?
Oh yeah, over at blueprintreview.co.uk. Funnily enough, I've actually reviewed a few of the films talked about recently. I covered I Walk with a Zombie a couple of weeks ago, Haxen, and also that the Snow Woman, which I mentioned earlier, and Leon's reviewed Night of the Living Dead. So there's quite a few recently reviewed, and if you go back in the archives, you'll find loads of the films we talked about today. Usually discs we tend to focus on Blu-rays and UHDs and things like that, and look into their special features and stuff as well. So yeah, check it out.
Dave Anderson, what are the kittens talking about this week?
Well, the kittens are still carrying the torch for physical media, and this is the time of year where we are sent a lot of titles for our annual holiday gift guide, which should be coming out in November. A lot of anniversary box sets that we'll be watching and reviewing, including the 10th anniversary of Interstellar, which to me might be the best science fiction film since 2001. I know that's not hip to say that, but so look out for a lot of box set reviews. Some really impressive ones too.
Yeah, get that post up quickly because I've got holidays coming up and I'm looking for things to gift to people. All right, Howard, how about you? What's going on at Pop Art?
Well, recently uploaded my latest episode. This is with Lisa Leahy, who is my annual Halloween guest. So this was the Halloween episode, and we combined, she chose 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I chose the William Wyler, I think 1965, The Collector. They're both about women who have been abducted and taken prisoner by someone. The next one right now is with Sammy Giuliano, and it's not written in stone, but it looks like he chose Ben-Hur, and I think I'm going with One-Eyed Jacks because they're both about friends. One betrays the other, and after the other serves some sort of time, comes back looking for revenge.
Revenge. There we go.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And by the way, I appreciate the shout out on Pop Art for our show here. Every time the promo shows up, I go, "Hey, good. Maybe somebody will show up."
Well, I'm also gladly willing to trade trade promos with anybody out there who has one. Just let me know.
Thank you. And the same here, folks. Make sure that if you want your podcast or show to be mentioned and you've got a promo for it, send it this way because I'm happy to include it in the show. I'm still... Go ahead.
We have one, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I've used it.
Too.
In fact, he used it on the episode I listened to yesterday on my way back from the movies that I went to. I was listening to Howard's podcast with, I think, was it the one with Lisa? Or was it the one with Todd that had...
Nate, I think.
Bubba Wheat. That's right. Yeah. So
Total Recall and General Della Road.
We're trying to make use and make sure everybody knows about all of the shows that are associated with this group, and appreciate that a great deal. I'm trying to catch up from my week at the Paramount Theater where they were doing Panic at the Paramount this week. I missed the first night because I was at a concert. The second night I could only stay for Rosemary's Baby. I'm in the middle of writing that post now. Yesterday I saw Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, and Return of the Living Dead, so we'll get posts on that soon, I promise you, and I hope to have them done before I get even further behind tomorrow. Later on this evening, I've got Death Becomes Her and Jawbreaker in front of me, so keeping up with the Joneses is just tough, but keeping up with the movies, holy criminy, that's even tougher.
Richard, just to let you know, 11 more days till Halloween, 11 more days till Halloween.
Thank you for the countdown. I know, Shamrock Silver Productions is coming, and they've got masks for me out there available now. All right. Well, I want to thank all of our guests for joining us this week. I appreciate it. We're going to have the post up this week so that people can vote on what they thought was the best list of films from pre-1973 for our horror draft here. And we'll have that up, and it'll close probably right after Halloween so that we can move on to something else. But I think people... You listen to the show, make sure that you vote for the slate of films that you thought was the best. We had a great list of films that we talked about this week, and everybody here deserves at least a couple of votes, although I do prefer that you vote for my list. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.